Hello, American history. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good week last week. Remember, last week we talked about the beginning of World War I. It was called World War because it was multiple countries in the world at war. It wasn't just a conflict between one or two nations, or I mean, not one nation, but one group of nations, as far as like one group, like as far as two. And it wasn't even just say, hey, it's these two and another one's helping. It was a world war. In Europe, pretty much most of the countries there, the big countries, were fighting against one another. Now remember, it started because a guy from Serbia had shot and killed the Archduke Francis Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. Serbia did not like that Austria-Hungary was taking over land that they thought was theirs. And so that 19-year-old kid, remember his name was Gavrilo Principe, and he assassinated Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife. Well, as a result, remember Austria-Hungary said, hey, Serbia, we blame you for this, and so we are going to go to war with you. And then Russia was like, no, you may go to war with them, but we are going to be at Serbia's side. And then Germany said, well, we are going to be on the side of Austria-Hungary. And so you see countries are starting to build around these two countries, and it's creating a world war. Now remember, we had the Central Powers that consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and Turkey. And then the Allied Powers, which was Serbia, Russia, Britain, France, and Italy. And so we have the Central Powers and Allied Powers. And remember, they were beginning to fight. They had trench warfare where they were in the trenches, real nasty and just, but that's where they stayed. It helped protect them from the enemy. And no man's land was the area between. And then we had, different weapons. The tank, we had airplanes, we have the machine gun, we have mustard gas, we have a gas mask to protect against the gas. And so we see all these different, new innovations about how to fight and trying to get the edge. Well, now we're going to see where America comes in World War I. America was neutral on the situation. They did not want to get involved. Even though they were trading with countries that were at war, it was not necessarily affecting them at first. President Wilson wanted them to be neutral. I mean, it's not affecting them, like it's not their war to fight. But this was difficult for several reasons. One was America favored the Allied cause. The Allies, France, Britain, mainly those two, America had relationship with them. Britain, that's where, America got their independence from, and so the ways of doing things really came from Britain, a lot of things. And then France had helped America win the Revolutionary War to gain independence from Britain. And America traded with Britain. They were a big trade companion. And so America had more business with the Allies. They still did business with people of the Central Powers, but with France, with Germany, or not Germany, with Britain. But Germany saw this as a sign of breaking neutrality. Being neutral, you're not for either side. You're in the middle. It's like you're not picking a side. It's kind of like if you have two siblings or two friends and they are arguing, they're in a conflict, and then they say, hey, what do you think? Like, I'm going to be neutral. I'm not getting involved in this fight, this war. So that's how America was. And so Germany saw that when they were still trading with Britain, that they were giving Britain, resources to fight against Germany. And then Britain, saw that America was still trading with Germany. And so it's like, you got to pick one. That's what they were both thinking. And they were thinking that you're really not being, even though America was trading with both of them, each side thought, you're breaking neutral. You're helping both of them. Even though it is in the middle, like it's really, interesting that you're helping both try to win this war, when it's like one of them's got to get an edge in order to win the war. And so Britain and France influenced America into joining the war. They had control of the cables that brought messages about what was going on. Germany, they only had access to the radio, which was still pretty new and still, improving. So Germany and Britain are fighting each other, and America is helping both of them. America did not, like I said, they were in the middle. Even though either side didn't like that, they were going to remain in the middle. Well, these two things that happened helped America eventually pick a side. Britain saw that America was starting to help Germany. And so when American ships, providing goods, came through in Europe, Britain made it very difficult for American ships that were trying to trade with Germany. And so, but they did it in a more peaceful way. They made it where they would have to go through inspections. So they would still get to Germany. It would just take a long time. Well, Germany, instead of a peaceful way, they threatened and attacked American ships. And they threatened them really just through attacking. They didn't even give a warning about their attack or that they would attack. They did this by submarines. Germany was using submarines. Germany did not give a warning about that they were attacking, and this was an violation of international law. Germany had attacked and destroyed American ships that were trading. Like I said, they're not even in the war. America's not, and they are being attacked because they are, having trade with Britain. Germany then put ads in newspapers to warn Americans not to travel on British vessels, but America ignored the warnings. Here are the turning points for America joining the war. The stuff before that was leading up to it. Now this is the actual turning points. In May 1915, a German U-boat, a submarine, sank the Lucenta, a British boat, without warning. They didn't say, hey, you need to stay back or we'll attack you. No, they just attacked them and they were destroyed. 1,198 people died, and 128 of them were Americans. So American lives were lost because of this. President Wilson told Germany they need to apologize for the incident, and that if they continued doing things like this, that America would withdraw diplomatic recognition, so a relationship with them. Germany cooperated for a while, so they would stop using submarines and attacking. But when Germany began to lose ground in the war, they were like, we got to go back to our submarines. That's how we're winning this, or that's part of how we're winning this war. We have to get Britain, we have to get them to be eliminated. We have to, cut their supply lines and chains and force them surrender. So they continue to use their U-boats. And as a result of that, in 1917, America broke relations with Germany. In March of 1917, German Prime Minister Arthur Zimmermann sent a telegram to the German minister in Mexico. And he told him that, tell Mexico that if America gets in the war, that if Mexico helps attack America, then Mexico would be rewarded and they would retain Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Because remember, United States is above Mexico, and it's right there. Now remember, they had a war, a while back, and that's in fact that's why America got access to Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. And so Britain found out about the message, and the U.S., were told by the British. And the next day after this happened, President Wilson released the message to all Americans, and they were very angry. Can you imagine that, Americans have been killed by Germans. They are not cooperating. They are telling your bordering country that, if you help us, we'll help, you get your land back, as far as, trying to get land, that you previously had that had already been fought over. And so it's like America would have more than just Germany. They would have to worry or focus on Mexico, which is right there. And so Americans were very outraged about this. Germany then sank 3 more American ships. So they're really they're adding fuel to the fire. Have you ever seen where if you have a fire and there's depending on what you throw in it, it will make the fire even bigger. Well, they had this fire that Germany, was throwing things in, and then it just got even bigger when they were doing this. And as a result, on April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. So America has joined the war. Now, this took a lot of preparation. Think about it. You got to have, people to fight. You have to have food for them. You have to have, ammo. You have to have weapons. You have to have transportation as far as getting to Europe. You are helping the Allied forces, Allied powers, and so trying to provide. So there was provide for them. So there was a lot of preparation that needed to be done. And Germany was starting to get an edge in the war. They were starting to gain ground on Britain and France. And so America had to work, and they had to work fast. So how did they do this? Well, they needed an army that would last them in the war and the weapons to fight. So the first time since the Civil War, they drafted soldiers to fight. They drafted men to fight. And 4 million men were drafted and trained. Because they had to train these men. They didn't know how to fight. They didn't know how to go into battle. And so they trained these men and got them ready to go. The U.S. sent the Allied powers and forces resources. And they used destroyers called convoys, which would eliminate and protect against submarines. And so America had a solution to counter the submarines of the Germans. The War Industries Board organized industrial production. So, they got factories and transformed them to prepare for the war. So say if it was like a food factory, or say it was a, factory that doesn't really make weapons and everything, these factories were turning around and getting everything ready for the war. Because think about it. If they, didn't get involved, Germany, could have won the war. Mexico could have attacked the U.S. And so there's a number of factors, but they got involved. And so they were making a number of things for the war. They were making uniforms. They were making guns. They were making bullets and ammunition. They were making vehicles and medical supplies. They were getting all this provided to go to Europe. The U.S. wanted to conserve fuel. And so, needed for, the planes and for the, say like tanks and for, transportation, like cars and different things. And so they would conserve fuel. So they would not have, so they would have to have the fuel for those things. And so what they did is, they asked Americans to walk more. Like say if you're just going down the street, just walk instead of drive. they had days where people wouldn't get gas. And so they would call these gasless days. And so it was like, hey, no one get gas today. And people were united on this because they were knew it was in support of the war. The U.S. Did this similar to gas. They did this with food. And Americans were asked on certain days not to purchase these types of foods. Monday was wheatless, bread and grains. So on Monday, you did not buy any bread or grain-related things. On Tuesday, it was meatless, so you would not buy any beef or chicken. On Thursdays, it was porkless, so you would not buy ribs or barbecue. You would not buy things related to pork. And so Americans began to raise more of their own vegetables, to provide food for themselves. And so, but with Americans uniting together, they saved the country money and were able to help in the war. Think about when people are not buying all these things, there's more to go to the war. And so they're saving money by instead of trying to, make all this stuff in the factory. It's already, they don't have to make as much, and so they can use it for the war. Because so many men went to fight in the war, there's still jobs out there, and the country, the country still needs to be run, and so as a result, in the workforce, women stepped up and began to work outside the home for the first time. How about this? This is what we call history, things that happened for the first time. Women worked outside the home for the first time. They went to, whether it was factories, whether they went to, jobs all across the U.S., and they stepped up. And some remained in those jobs after the war. President Wilson funded the Committee on Public Information. So this was where it was getting the word out. They wanted to get the word out that World War I, this is what is going on. We are at war, and we need you to help us. And so they would provide posters. They would provide advertisements, whether it was on the radio, whether it was sending messages. And so it was to spread the word out saying, hey, we need your help. American people, it's all up to you of how we can win this war. And people started to see that, hey, when we, provide money or provide, help through volunteer programs, like say the American Red Cross or different things like that. When we provide help, we are a part of this war. Even though we aren't going all the way to Europe, even though we aren't, a soldier that is fighting in combat battle, we are still a part of this war, and we are helping, and we are playing our part in it. So, that helped, encourage Americans. Hey, we need you, and you are a part of this war just as much as, those that are going to Europe. So in addition to posters being made, there were men called 4-minute men, and they gave short talks about the importance of war and to support it. They would do that for 4 minutes. Americans' attitude toward Germany and the Central Powers began to change. They did not like Germany. They did not like anything German. In fact, it's sad, but Germans that lived in America, they were persecuted because they were German. It's like, hey, well, it's because of your country that we're getting involved in this war. They're attacking us, or you're in on it. And so they would, persecute them. When really, in reality, these Germans had been in America for several years. So they had nothing to do with what was going on in Germany. They loved America. In fact, that's why they came to America, and they were the Americans themselves. They were just formerly German American, or they were German Americans, and so they were formerly from Germany. So it was sad to see that. Schools stopped teaching German. Orchestras stopped playing songs that were made by Germans and composed by Germans. In fact, certain German things were called liberty. Say, example of that is hamburgers were called Liberty Burgers. So instead of calling hamburgers, they called Liberty Burgers. And so, dachshunds were called Liberty Dogs. And so anything that was German, it really just was replaced with like liberty, so freedom, and that, you know, they wanted freedom for those countries in Europe away from Germany. Now, to pay for the war, wars can be very expensive. Think about all that you have to, provide, and how are you going to provide it? You got to have a bunch of money. Well, in order to provide for the war, the government, used taxes as a way. They used loans, but also Americans would, help out giving money. They would buy war bonds, and that would be basically, donating, say, hey, I'm giving this for the war, for these specific things, or just for the war in general. And so throughout the war, Americans raised, this is really just awesome, Americans raised more than $18 million in World War I. $18 million. Can you believe that? This is the early 1900s. We're talking about like from 1917 to 1919, or around that time frame. $18 million. And this wasn't, people weren't making a whole lot at this time as far as, but $18 million. How awesome is that? That Americans are coming together for a great cause and stepping up. And they, really just showed that, hey, we are the United States of America. We are coming together for a cause. So what a huge deal that they were able to do that. So it is awesome to see how America came together at a crucial time. They came together rapidly and did what was needed to help provide the support and the resources for this war. They provided, as far as themselves as a country with different things and soldiers and resources. And then they provided the Allied powers with resources as well. And so we see that America is getting involved in the war, and they are having a huge impact. Next week, we will talk more about, the fighting that took place in Europe as far as America and how they did that and how they attacked it and fought against Germany. But our assignments this week, one assignment is you will answer questions about what we have just talked about. And so hopefully you took notes, but you are going to answer questions about what we have just talked about. And then another assignment is I will give you a worksheet regarding some things that we have talked about. And so one will be about answering questions. One may be will be a worksheet with different things on it. And so I will provide that, for you, and it'll be attached in the document on the assignment, or in an attached document on the assignment. So remember to get those to me by Friday at 5 o'clock. And so, but hope you enjoy learning about World War I and how the U.S. was involved and how they came together as a nation to help win this war. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful week.